Quotation from myself, segment 89, quotation number 1051. Some accuse us, but what they say, the others, but what they as individuals are. As for example, the moral and the honest people accuse the immoral and the dishonest ones, not so much by words of condemnation, but mostly by their upright behavior. The same applies to the approval. Some praise us with words, the others by being the same as we are. 1052. Every young religion begins by criticizing the shortcomings of the old one, with most of criticism directed against its preoccupation with the external manifestation of faith and the neglect of its internal meaning, and ends up by doing exactly what it once condemned. For while the established religion relies heavily on symbolism, especially the visual one, of its rites and rituals, there is always a minority in its midst which is dissatisfied with such a superficiality and is looking for a deeper spirituality in its faith. And when this minority becomes sufficiently strong and self-assured, it revolts against the established religion by denouncing first of all the disproportionate amount of attention paid to the symbolic or purely theatrical aspect of the religion at the expense of its essential message. But as these revolutionaries gain more and more followers, as their number grow, they begin, in order to keep their new flock from leaving, to develop gradually their own set of symbolic ceremonies and mysterious rites, unable to resist the craving of the masses for spectacle and entertainment. Judaism, which started as a rejection of polytheistic multiplicity of gods and theatricality of pagan worship in all its tremendous variety of images, colors, sounds, and movements, by opposing this visual splendor with austerity and simplicity of a single deity, without name or face, eventually went on to develop in its mature and established as a state religion stage its own elaborate and numerous symbols, rules and regulations. When Christianity was born in the bosom of Judaism, the early Christians attacked this imposing edifice with a vengeance of zealots, all the while claiming that they come not to destroy, but to fulfill and to restore Judaism to its original and unadorned spirituality, purpose, and meaning. But as Christianity itself became the dominant religion, the Catholic Church created its own symbolic rites and rituals, combining the excesses of both pagans and the Jews. The Protestants followed the pattern. Reformation also began by condemning the excesses of the Catholic Church, its obsession with the visual, largely ceremonial symbols and material aspect of religion, at the expense of its spiritual and intellectual side. It stressed the primacy of knowledge of biblical texts over the pomp and pageantry of the Catholic service. Yet after establishing itself, Protestantism restored some of it, albeit to a different degree, in the different denominations. It must be acknowledged, though, that emphasis on symbolism are much weaker overall in the Protestant churches than in Catholicism. Perhaps it is a result of the growing educational level of the believers, perhaps of division within Protestantism caused by the continuous competition between its various branches for the adherents, with their conflicting claims of original purity of the faith as the main attraction. But if Protestantism represents a trend, which is by no means certain, considering that Catholic Church is still the largest one, with hundreds of millions of followers, then as literacy education spread all religion, the old and especially the new ones, will have to appeal more and more to heart and head than to the eyes and the ear. Though I personally doubt it, because the conflict between extrinsic and intrinsic, form and substance, body and soul, symbolic and essential, is not new, but deeply rooted in different functions of senses and intellect. The senses perceive the extrinsic, form, body, and symbolic. The intellectual contemplates the intrinsic, substance, soul, and essence. As in the act of sense perception is immediate and effortless, but the process of understanding is long and arduous, requiring substantial effort, it is not surprising that only a small minority at any time and in every religion is willing to endure the hardship of the second, while the majority will always prefer the first as an easy way out. What was will be again. What was will be again. What has been done will be done again. (1053) If what one is saying is not understood by the listeners, the two different explanations are possible. The first, that what has been said is very much above their heads, and therefore is not the fault of the speaker. The second, that the speaker has failed to make himself understood right away, due to his inability to express himself clearly and concisely. Needless to say, the arrogant and lazy prefer the first explanation, and accordingly wouldn't even make the slightest effort to bridge the gap of misunderstanding between them and the audience, while the modest and industrious will try again and again to reach out, if not all, then at least halfway. (1054) Not so long ago, someone who preached one thing and did quite the opposite was called a hypocrite or worse. Nowadays, in our post-Freudian, psychoanalytic, all-explain, all-condone age, such a person is described as a complex individual, or in the case of glaring or pardonable contrast between the ostensibly professed views and everyday conduct, as the one having a multiple personality. 1055. Perhaps I am wrong, but it seems obvious to me now, after having observed for many years different people and their relative degrees of success in life, that in order to achieve anything worthwhile, one has to be driven primarily by the need to prove to others and to oneself that he is capable of more than what was expected of him in the beginning. Which explains why so many who had promised so much when young have failed so miserably later. For such an early acknowledgement of their abilities was apparently for many the sufficient reward in itself, and thus stunned the drive for it later in life by removing right from the start one of the main incentives on human striving. Besides, while such an early acknowledgement is obtained as a rule almost effortlessly, solely on the strength of one's congenital potentials, the actual fulfillment of the promises later requires hard and consistent work, which for someone who grew accustomed to easy success is very difficult to do. 1056. There are always some ambitious individuals, primarily men, who want above everything else to be a dominant male. Blame the monkeys. wherever they are, and nothing less will ever satisfy them. In view of this, all human groupings, like family, tribe, church, cult, political party, gangs, etc., can be traced to such power-hungry individuals who organize them to obtain this position of dominance. And if only the world had enough of these positions for all who crave for them, it would have been a much more peaceful place to live in. Unfortunately for the rest of us, though a number of such aspiring leaders is limited, there seems to be never enough position of leadership to placate all of them. Hence the conflict, the struggle, the strife, the suffering, which are continuously inflicted upon the majority of ordinary people by the small minority of eager for superiority Führer wannabes, always in a single-minded quest for obtaining and preservation of power. Are there any remedies against this universal plague? The citizen of the ancient Athens, forever weary of tyranny, used the custom of ostracism to banish the potential dictator from the city. But it seldom worked, for quite often the exiles will return to wreak a bloody vengeance on their opponents. The modern democracy, which is much more sophisticated than the ancient one, deals with this social disease by providing the legitimate opportunity of creation of seemingly infinite number of different human associations to allow the power-hungry to get what they want with doing least possible amount of harm to the rest. But as with the material greed, the lust for dominance is never fully satiated. The one who today rules 100 wants to command 1,000 tomorrow and 10,000 the day after, and vow to them who are in their way. 1057. Several years ago, when I had read my poetry for the first time in public, one of the listeners told me in a rather accusative manner that I wasn't the first to have expressed such a particular sentiment or thoughts. I still remember being so chaffed by this remark and so defensive at that moment that I actually demanded from the accusers to prove it by names and quotations. Nowadays I am much more sanguine about the whole matter. First of all, it is not who said it first, for since there is nothing new under the sun, in truth nobody knows it for sure, but who said it the best that counts. And even if I haven't done it any better, but only different than anybody else before me, and most of all independently, I still have a consolation of being in such an illustrious company of like-minded poets and thinkers, and my only regret is that most of them have been dead for a long, long time. Moreover, one should rejoice rather than lament the fact that others have written before what he is writing now. For I strongly believe that the main purpose of writing is to dialogue with someone out there who would truly understand what you are saying, and finding out that there were or are actually people who felt and thought exactly like you do now, and it makes one feel somewhat less lonely in this huge and indifferent world.